Is investing in gold important for Christians? Let's find out. Stick around.
Exploring theology, doctrine, and all of the fascinating subjects in between, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, Dead Men Walking starts
now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Moore. You can find out more about us at dmwpodcast.com or check us out on the socials, Dead Men Walking Podcast, Twitter X at Real DMW Podcast. Guys, I got to tell you about two businesses here that we have to support. Dominion Wealth Strategist, the only distinctly reformed financial company, full service financial planning and wealth management. I mean, these guys are great. Justin, Josiah, know them both, business owners. They're going to be helping you with budgeting, debt management, savings, life and health insurance, retirement planning, estate planning, business services. You need to place your money with Christians, not degenerates, and these guys can help. I mean, they got you covered in all of those things. As a realtor myself, I'm very interested in estate planning, retirement planning, obviously life and health insurance as well too, debt management, budgeting. I mean, these guys will get you right. You know, if you own a business, if you're an influencer at your business, heck, even if you're working a 9 to 5 and you are making a living, you need to talk to these guys because they're going to help you invest not only your finances wisely, but get you straight on your budgeting and then offer you just about everything else that you might quite possibly need. All of Christ for all of life, all of finance for all of Christendom is their motto, and I absolutely love it. You can book a meeting with them at www.reformed.money. One of the coolest URLs out there. Very easy to remember, reform.money, or just click on the link below wherever you're watching or listening to this, and it'll get you right to them. But Dominion Wealth Strategist, my guys, you got to go talk to them. From baptism to burial, Dominion has you covered. And of course, same thing. If you guys own a business, going to start a business, technology, it's one of the most powerful tools in our world today. You got to work with someone who knows how to use technology. Advent DS. These guys know what they're doing. I don't care if it's website design, if it's customer retention, if it's SEO with Google for search. I mean, these guys will get it all done for you, and you need to call him. Bruce, who's been on the podcast before. Also, Bruce from Advent DS, who's doing my own personal site. So I use these guys. You need to use these guys. I'm very picky about who does what for my business, and I know Advent DS is going to do a great job. You can contact them at bruce@adventds.org, or once again, just click below. All the sponsors are there. Guys, these are brothers in the Lord that are pulling in the same direction, that are, all sponsors that you hear on this show, that I believe in them. I've met with them. They went through an interview process. I am very particular about who I'm going to refer to, and both Dominion Wealth Strategist and Advent DS, they meet that high standard. So if you're in that industry, please use and click on and use these sponsors. Let's support other brothers in the Lord that are building things, running businesses, and bringing glory to God in it. All right. This week we had on James, or Jim Hunter, as he goes by, Alps Precious Metals Group, and we talked all gold, and it was awesome. I've been waiting for someone like this to come on the podcast for almost 5 years now. A guy who understands investing in gold, understands monetary policy. We talked about the Federal Reserve. We talked about how gold can help against inflation, how it's a good investment strategy. We talked about policy. Towards the end of the episode, we got into what we should be looking forward to into a Trump administration, how that's going to affect pricing and inflation and gold and all that stuff. I mean, it was really a policy heavy episode, not so much a theology or doctrine that I've gotten to in the past with people when talking about this stuff. But as a guy who was on Wall Street, who's in the finance industry, who has 40 plus years experience in that, very successful hedge fund manager. I mean, this is the guy you want to talk to. And now he's going, look at what I'm doing is I'm trying to help Christians to invest wisely and understand the power of gold, talking about Genesis 2, when the river runs out of Eden and the gold is good. God called gold, gold good from the creation story. So very interesting. We talked about all of those things, and I found the episode very informative. And I think we have to clean up some audio in some of it. Our connection on some of it went a little bit sideways, but I'll make sure we clean it up as best as we can. But give it a listen, guys. I mean, if you are looking around you today, in this world and going, banking sucks, crony capitalism sucks, our monetary policy sucks, inflation is through the roof. Like, what's going on? Jim broke it down for us, told us exactly what was going on, how we resolved that, how we invest our money wisely. And even if it's, if you're a church elder or a shepherd and you have monetary funds in your church, some of that should be gold, silver, or precious metals. And he makes quite a good case for that. So, guys, the next two voices you hear will be me and Jim Hunter from Alps Precious Metal Group talking gold. It's the gold episode. Stick around. Oh, so Jim Hunter, welcome to Dead Man Walking Man. Good to see you again.
Honored to be here. Great to meet you at Left Feast and always fun to be with those boys from Moscow, Idaho, and meet new friends and brethren that are all across the country. So great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'd seen you on Cross Politic before. We met for the first time a few weeks ago at Fight Laugh Feast, and I wanted to have you on and talk about something that's always been very interesting to me is because I've had some guys on from Thank God for Bitcoin. They do a little investing in Bitcoin and stuff, and you've got that. And I've always been kind of very squirmish on fiat money and non-gold backed money, especially since we came off that standard in the mid 70s. And, I was a real fun high schooler, because for our senior projects, they were doing Van Halen and my favorite band. And I'm going, well, I want to do the buying of Congress and why we're off the gold standard, right? It was like, so from a younger age, I was always very interested in monetary policy and what we're kind of doing. And, my father, he invests in gold and silver and some other things. And wanted to talk to you about that. But before we get in that, can you give us a little bio on yourself, a little origin story of Jim Hunter, where you're from, what you're about, and what you're doing now?
Sure. Born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. I was amongst a lot of Reformed brethren. I'm the rare, it's like those bumper stickers you see that say native. I was Reformed before Reform was cool.
Right. Okay.
So, but that was mainline church. Had a call to ministry when I was 7 years old. Majored in religion at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, which is no conservative bulwark by any stretch of the imagination. But we did have to read the scriptures, and we did have to read Augustine. We did have to read Calvin and Luther. And I'm going to school in the mid '80s, and I was just stunned by what Christianity was, what I thought Jesus was, and then who he actually is in the scriptures and with these great saints that had gone before us. That led into a long and winding road of Episcopalian continuing churches, which morphed ultimately into the Anglican Church. I have never felt those guys were they were getting at the margin, getting at the edges, but they weren't getting to the disease. And the disease is the complete trust of Scripture.
Right.
How do you know that? Because you still have women ministers all over the Anglican, what it's called, ACNA, Anglican Church of North America. Yeah. So that led me to the CREC because of the original constitution of the CREC, which is Sola Scriptura, Apostles' Nicene, Athanasian Creed, and then one of the four confessions, one of which was the 39 Articles. I said I was raised Presbyterian, which I was, but both sets of grandparents were Episcopalian. And and I spent a lot of time in an Episcopal youth group, et cetera. And my Presbyterian upbringing, if there's such a thing as high Presbyterian, that's how I was raised. So the differential was almost zero. I still believe that there is a huge, there's an amount of the Lord's flock that is basically wandering around, that if you restored a J.C. Ryle, truly reformed, truly dedicated to the Scriptures, 39 Articles, and the Creeds church, that church would and will thrive. And that prayer. So that's on the how God has kindly given me faith, grown me in the faith, etc. in terms of my day job,
Mhm.
that is, was always you had mentioned your dad, and my grandfather was a physician in Boston, and he was in his focus was hematology, diseases of the blood, leukemia. But no one could understand him if he ever started to talk shop, as it was way over everybody's head. But he did love to talk about Wall Street. So when I went to declare my major, was it religion? Was it economics? Religion, economics. I eventually declared religion, but it was fascinated with Wall Street and markets. That led me to ultimately, I got an MBA at Auburn University, where the Ludwig von Mises Austrian Economics Institute is. So I was heavily influenced by those guys.
All
They
right.
are a hard money group as well. So I went down that path, and that led me eventually to First Tennessee Bank and their fixed income division, which then led to Merrill Lynch and Lehman Brothers, and I was all involved with that part of Wall Street on the institutional fixed income side of sales and trading. I then had, if you're familiar with the film The Big Short,
Sure.
and another one, if you haven't seen this, or your viewers haven't seen the film A Margin Call. Margin Call nails it.
Yeah.
I have been in those rooms. They absolutely got it right. But I bring those up only because from 2005 to 2010, my partner and I, my partner at the time, had a structured credit hedge fund. We essentially were the Big Short. We were Michael Burry,
Okay.
but we did not take as much risk as he did, because we were two guys in Fairhope, Alabama, with a couple of Bloomberg screens, and we couldn't get this wrong like he did for
Right.
several years. But we did very, very well. But the denouement of that was watching firms like Merrill Lynch, like JP Morgan, like Goldman Sachs. All of them literally should be out of business. They should. If it was not a rules for thee and not for me situation, which is what we
Right.
live in right now,
Yeah.
Goldman, Morgan Stanley, Citibank, JP Morgan, Bank of America, all would have had the fate of the Duke brothers at the end of Trading Places, where they say margin call boys, and they say, you know perfectly well, we don't have $394 million in cash.
Right.
So that's what should have happened to him, but it didn't. And when I watched how that occurred, and what we did as a hedge fund, and how we differentiated, how we competed against guys in London and New York and San Francisco, is we said, if you come and need liquidity, we will give it to you, which we did, and our assets went from essentially with the gains in them, went from something like 50 million all the way down to 2. Well, because we did what we said we were going to do.
Sure.
But meanwhile, we have these counterparties that are offsides, don't have capital, and they're recapitalized from the Federal Reserve and the United States government. And we're now 15 years past the fact, and these guys are still flying around on G7s like they're like, oh yeah, we weathered the storm. I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't weather the storm at all. This is a joke. So that's sort of a bad taste in my mouth, and wanting to get. And I had always had, I mentioned my grandfather because in addition to talking about Wall Street, he also talked about gold. Not a lot, but enough to where when you combine my grandfather, my time at Auburn, and the Von Mises Institute and hard money, and then seeing what happened to Wall Street, that's what led me there.
Mm.
And now I live in Pensacola, Florida, functionally related to the fact that my children went to Trinitas Christian School, which is an AC. It's one of the flagship AS class schools. I was part of Providence Church as well, where Yuri Brito is.
Yep.
So I've got a history here. And through the school, I met my current partner, who was also a gold guy. And we started this company about 8 years ago. And the focus of our company is to say, what's our value add? It's to come to individuals, corporations, and Greg, I would especially say churches. So any elders listening to this podcast, I would beg them, whether they buy ounce of gold or silver from me or not. I don't care who they buy it from, but churches have got to start thinking about their exposure to a financial system that is not their friend. And
Right.
if we get into a 2008 2.0, and I would argue there is every reason. I don't care how high the markets are. This is a castle. This is a castle that's been built on sand. If it was this simple, and all we have to do is just take interest rates to zero, recapitalize through a bank. Shoot, why don't we just do it all the time? Just set rates at zero, and everybody's going to be a zillionaire with a 3-car garage. What's the problem, right? But there is a problem, and that's what this is all built on. So how do you mitigate those risks? How can one be as wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove? I've said to many people at the Fight Laugh Feast that would come to our booth, I say, look, I am not telling you to light your hair on fire, sell every single asset you have and run to the hills and get in the cave with your gold stash like a dragon. What I am saying is realize that when this goes again, they're going to come for the deposits. And where am I getting that from? That's straight out of the Dodd-Frank Act.
Yes.
Now is now in law. And if you go to Title II of that, it tells you in black and white, how will the SIFIs, systemically important financial institutions, how are
too
they
big to fail? Yep.
Right. How are they going to be recapitalized? They're going to be recapitalized by changing the capital structure waterfall of where the money comes from to recapitalize, say, JP Morgan. Sure, it'll come from the equity holders, but it is what they've done is moved to the senior status, the off-balance sheet derivative swap contracts of these SIFIs, which means who goes first when they're looking for capital? It's going to be the depositors.
Yeah.
And here I am, and this is why I talk about churches. Let's say a church, God has blessed them for 10 years, and they want to build a building. So they have very faithfully been putting up beside their tithes and their offerings, and that thing's built up to $5 or $10 million. And if I guarantee you, if I go to the session meeting, they're all going to be at the session meeting. We have to be very conservative with these assets, so we're going to put them in CDs in banks, right? Because they are FDIC insured.
Which for the listeners really means nothing due to fractional banking, but if there was really a run on banks, but go ahead.
Because the capital, you're talking about a capital base of the FDIC of 25 billion with a B, and you're talking about an asset size of JP Morgan in the multiple trillions. There is no insurance. And so, and I use the example of a church building fund because anything over that 250,000 insured amount is going to be liable to be bailed in. And if you use the example of Cyprus, if you look at the Cypriot Bank crisis of 2013, the deposits in those financial institutions were bailed in, and they got a 50% haircut. So here I am. I'm an elder. I've been doing the right thing. I've been prudent. The banks, 2008 2.0. Here comes the haircut. We thought we were going to build our building next fall. Oh no, we're not, because that just got cut in half. Yeah. So if I'm prudent, maybe I don't have to take it all out. But what if I say put 10 or 20% into physical gold? If I do that, then what happens if we get into 2008 2.0? Is gold going to go down, or is it going to rally? I'm going to argue that it's going to rally against that sort of confiscation. A lot of people will say, Jim, but didn't FDR confiscate gold in 1933? And the answer is yes, he did. No doubt about it. The difference between 1933 and 90 years later is that in 1933, the confiscation of gold was a material take. It mattered when they basically stole the gold from American individuals. It was a material amount of capital, and it was able to offset what on a relative basis was no debt problem at all, right? Now
Yeah.
you're looking at 35 trillion. Now on the grand scale of things, hardly anybody has gold. If the US government tried to confiscate American holdings of physical gold, it wouldn't move the needle at all.
Right.
As opposed to, we're going to bail in their treasuries, their IRAs, their bank exposure. Now that's a material amount of money.
So gold helps against this. How? Meaning, we know, like you just explained, we know if there's a run on the banks or there has to be a bailout, they're coming for the depositors first. And when you say that, just so I want to make sure everyone's understanding what we're talking about too. Depositor meaning any money that you have in any bank could be used under Dodd-Frank. That was one of the things that passed. And I remember screaming about this, going, okay, so now me and you are on the hook for the next bailout.
Right.
I would say we have something coming in the future, just from me being in real estate and understanding what's going on there, and the
Sure.
commercial bubble that's next, with lease rates and things like that. So we come to someone like you, what's your official title? Is it contractor? Are you a facilitator, broker? What is it that?
The company name is Alps Precious Metals Group. Alps
Okay.
comes from the fact that when we first started the company, our primary partner was in the little country of Liechtenstein Precious Metals. We loved them because it was two family offices that had their own. These were ultra high net worth families, used their own capital, built their own trading facility, built their own Class 10 Lloyd's of London top of the food chain vault in Liechtenstein. As over the 8 years that we've been in business, we now have a domestic partner as well, Texas Precious Metals, in the little town of Shiner, Texas. For those of you who've heard of Shiner Bock beer, the vault is right across the street.
Okay.
From the brewery. But same situation. Ultra high net worth family, built their own trading desk, built everything from scratch, built their own vault. And that's the key to it is sure, there's Brinks, there's Loomis, there are alternatives out there, and there's certainly bank vaults. But the trouble with the bank vault is, wait a second, I'm trying to hedge bank risk, and I just stuck my hedge in the very thing I'm trying to hedge. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
So what I hear a lot.
I was just going to answer. So to answer, what are we? So we are really if you really pulled pull the onion back, you'd say, okay, well, what you're really doing is you're consulting with individuals, families, churches, and corporations to say, the first thing we're doing is the concept. It's the teaching of the concept and why it matters. And then we have partnerships. And this is, how do you guys get paid? We get paid because when we bring clientele to either Texas or Liechtenstein, well, these are clients that our partner firms wouldn't have had without us. So we have a revenue share with them on any revenue stream. There's no added commission, none of that nonsense. It's just simple. Those are the prices for vaulting or for trading that you would have paid had you never heard of Alps. But all Alps is doing is sharing the revenue that our partners would have had. So hopefully that makes it clear. And when it comes down to the nut cutting of, okay, we're going to buy the gold and put it in the vault, well, then we become as if we are Texas Precious Metals, right? I'm on their team in that sense.
So if someone comes to you and goes, yeah, I want to diversify, or yeah, I want to invest in gold, it's physical gold. We're not talking about something on the stock market or something like that. And are you putting it in their hands, or is it, like you said, held in a vault somewhere and they have access to it, or how does that work?
Their choice. So if Greg says, okay, I'm sold on the concept, let's go, I'd say, okay, Greg, there's going to be a waterfall of questions. Number one, are we buying this because you think that we may not get to Mad Max, but we might get close. And I want to be sure um, I've got something in my hands that I can use to go down to the grocery store if necessary. Or you might say, no, I don't think that at all. This is just for investment purposes. That's going to drive whether we're going to buy coins or whether we're going to buy the biggest bars we can.
Yeah.
You're a real estate guy. Anybody knows that the more of something you buy, the cheaper the execution price is going to be. Same thing here.
Sure.
No difference. And then the next question is, do you want to keep it in the vault or do you want to keep it in your own vault? You might have a gun safe at home. You might have a first class safe that's on your property somewhere. You don't need to vault it necessarily. The only downside with keeping it at home is the liquidity side. Let's say for whatever reason, Wall Street goes up in a sheet of flame, the stocks crash 90%, gold goes to the moon. Oh wait, now's the time to sell the gold and buy the stocks. Well, now if you've got it at home, it's just not a quick turnaround. You've got to get it boxed, you got to get it in, and of course you have no insurance at home. If you go to your State Farm guy and say, hey, I'd like to insure $100,000 worth of gold that I got back in my safe at home. First he's going to pass out. Then you get the smelling salts, wake him up, and then he's going to say, that'll cost you $15,000 a year to do that. Keep it in the vault with us, your vault charge includes the Lloyd's of London insurance against embezzlement, theft, any of the typical loss events.
So let me ask you this, because I've been thinking a lot about this. We've kind of been, as Western American Christians, indoctrinated into this kind of money system, and how we use money. Put it in a bank, put it in a savings account, maybe a CD, like you were saying. And then when you go to the Bible, it's very different. It's money being, working for you. And it seems I could even point to a few parables that seem very capitalistic. People get upset when I say that, but I see that kind of free market system played out in the Bible is probably under a sin nature, probably one of the fairest systems and most just systems that you can have. But I hear all these Christians complaining about the banking system is crooked and, fractional banking is evil and all this, but they don't really want to take the next step and go, okay, well, let's buck the system a little bit. And it still seems like gold sometimes has a little bit of a stigma to it, or sometimes they just go, I don't know if I want to take that step. They'll complain all day about the system and even live through the last 2 years and see that overnight you can have rapid inflation due to the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve and the U.S. federal government, but then not necessarily want to take that next step and go, I don't know if I want to get into precious metal, gold, silver, things like that, even though probably one of the, gold, one of the oldest precious metals that have been used for monetary policy going back well before Christ, has been used by civilizations for centuries and centuries. What would you tell to that Christian listening right now that goes, listen, I do recognize that there's issues with monetary policy globally and in the United States. I do realize it's a crooked system and a sinful system. What should I do to take that next step to get into precious metals and into gold and silver?
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start with Genesis chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. Pre-fall, God tells us about the rivers that go forth from Eden. And the first one is Passah, and it goes into the land of Havilah, and there is gold in that land, and the gold of that land is good. Why is the Lord telling us that in Genesis chapter 2 before the fall? So this is before we've even, blown the whole thing up and dispersed into the east of Eden, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a reason for that, because gold, throughout the rest of the scriptures, is a measuring. It's the marker. Wisdom is better than pure gold. It's higher, lower, whatever. But God is using it as a measuring tool for us. And then it is not. It's not a coinkydink that you've got gold, as you just mentioned, used all over the world. To this day, as far as human history as we have it. And 6,000, I'm a young Earth guy, 6,000 years of history, period. Well, there's never a period where you can point to, well, gold really wouldn't have worked then. No, that's not true. It's always works. It works
That's
to this
funny.
day.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
this day, it is the thing. And
It's one of the number one materials we use in semiconductors in our electronics. It's
Oh,
crazy
sure.
how it just spans eons and centuries and it's still useful.
Yep, absolutely. And then you say, well, if I look at the governments of the world today with our Bitcoin and our this and our that, and we put men on the moon, and we've got, more computing power in that phone than a wall of IBM computers 50 years ago, da 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 da. And yet, what is the largest non-real estate physical holding of governments all around the world? Every last one of them is their physical gold position.
Gold.
So,
Yep.
so if I say to, one of the things I say to um, uh, uh, prospective investors, or certainly a Christian, is like, look, forget every other argument we've brought up. Why don't you just want to get on the same side of the trade as these guys? Hey, what do I know? All I know is the United States got 8,133 tons of gold with a market value today of something like 750 billion.
Yeah.
If think of it this way, is it their like asset of last resort? What if we just instead of using the financial markets and the futures markets to monkey around and cap the price, what if we let the thing run? Like move the decimal one to the right. All of a sudden, I've got a $7 trillion asset versus my debt problem. And if I'm these guys like Musk and Vivek and the rest of those dudes who are probably, if they're allowed to do so, if they're allowed to actually get after it, they really could chop the debt problem down. Certainly to get us back to at least where you can start paying the debt down. And they might say, let's let gold fly, and let's let it figure out where it's supposed to actually settle. Not
So expand on that a little bit for me, because maybe I'm not understanding. So you're saying let gold fly and let it settle. Is it being regulated in some way, or explain what you mean by what they would do?
I think if you look at the in general, if we looked at the London banking system, if we look at Wall Street, those guys are not long gold. So let's step back. Why are they not long gold? Well, because gold, ultimately, going back to what we were talking about, gold and land of Havilah, Genesis chapter 2. One of the things that I also try to talk about is get the definition of money down before we do anything else. What is the definition of money? Well, money is a unit of account. It's a medium of exchange. But the most important thing is it's a store of labor. And what happens with gold when you do your Dead Men Walking podcast, you sell real estate, you go and do something. And let me bring in a quote from JP Morgan. That guy was no Christian, et cetera. A lot of bad things about the guy. But he said, gold is money and everything else is credit. Gold is money, everything else is credit. And he's 100% right. Wall Street and London know that gold is actual money. It's a place where you can put your labor, and there is no way to mess around with that labor. What happens to you, to me, and to every human being, every time a government does something where they create credit out of thin air, they have debauched the labor of every single person that works.
Thank you. Yes, I've been saying this for years. I wish people would understand really that money is just a bucket and a way to carry your labor, which is your time, which is the most precious asset that we have. In inflation and bad monetary policy literally is robbing you of your labor and your time. They go, oh, you had to go spend 8 hours to earn that. Well, guess what? It's actually like you spent 12 hours, or it's like I took 6 hours from you. It's insane that we don't equate money with our time when most people work those 9 to 5s, 40 hours a week, don't see their kids, don't see their wife. And then through bad monetary policy, through inflation, through all these things at the Federal Reserve, they just literally steal that back from you. It's theft is what it is.
Correct.
And when in fact you made a good point of going, look at when inflation rises, the price of gold actually protects against that, which I've always found interesting. So it's twofold. Not only are you not taking from me, but I have an asset that actually goes up faster than the rate of inflation, because it is the asset or commodity, or however you want to say it in financial terms, that people want in times of trouble.
Right.
I mean, so much so we had to send fake gold over to China in the 90s. We spray painted it. We didn't even have enough for them. And I don't know if you know that story. I don't know. Maybe a little conspiracy theory for you.
There's lots of the tungsten, gold painted tungsten stories out there. But
so gold is good. We have a whole generation that doesn't even know or understand that we were on a gold standard, that you used to get a silver note, that if you turned it into a federal bank, you could exchange it for silver. Like there's these weird things that not that long ago was pretty standard in our society. And now you have, even millennials and alphas and Gen Zs and younger going, well, what are you talking about? All they know is that money seems cheap. Inflation is horrible. Like, what are we doing? Which leads me to, why did we get off the gold standard, do you think, in the United States? And should we get back on it, or should we pursue that at all? Do you think from a political standpoint, or just go, you want to know what? We're going to do our own things as Christians, believers, being wise with our money. We'll invest in gold and just let everything else sort itself out.
Well, we got very simple about the why did we get off the gold standard? And not only silver certificates, but what is in your wallet today. In your wallet, you pull the dollar out and it says, "This note is legal tender for all what debts, public and private." Well, if I have something in my hand, basic accounting, if I have something in my hand that is legal tender for a debt, what by definition must it be?
A credit.
A credit.
Yeah.
JP Morgan. Gold is money. Everything else is credit. I'm walking around with credit, not with money. Okay.
Yeah.
So what was gold doing in the late 60s, early 70s? It was keeping Congress honest. If you want to go fight a war in Vietnam and run up all kinds of inflation because of what you're doing, fine. According to the Bretton Woods agreement, then I can come change my dollars and you got to fork the gold over. In fact, Charles de Gaulle, who knew exactly what kind of a cesspool we had just gotten ourselves involved in Vietnam because the French had left, was watching what we're doing going, oh no, I don't want these dollars. And he literally sent a destroyer, a French destroyer, sitting in the Chesapeake Bay saying, load that bad boy up. I want the gold. Here's your dollars. I don't want them.
Yeah.
Nixon and John Connally go, uh-oh. If people get if the governments and folks around the world get any bright ideas, we're not going to have any gold left.
Yeah.
So what does he do? Nixon gets on television, August 15th, 71. Secretary Connally, after deliberations, have temporarily suspended the ability to change dollars in for gold. Well, because they didn't want to fill up the French destroyer with our gold.
Yeah.
Now, is that reprehensible behavior? You say that we'll do something and then we just, we're not going to do it. Well, that's what we did.
Yeah.
We've done the same thing in, Ukraine. James Baker to Gorbachev, we will not move NATO 1 inch to the east. That is a flat lie. And that's all we've done is shoved it further and further east. And then we wonder why we're having a terrible problem over there.
Right.
But so we closed it because in closing the gold window, that allowed the government to do whatever they wanted in terms of
spend without any responsibility. Yeah.
Correct. Spend for Vietnam, spend for social programs, whatever you have. And we went for it. And all you got to do is look at the debt issue at the time and look at it now. And what has gold done? Gold is almost gone. We're at 75, 80x now from
Wow.
when because we were about $40 an ounce when the gold window was closed, and now we're 2,700 an ounce, 26, whatever it is, 2,600 an ounce
Yeah.
right now.
And $35 trillion in debt 50 short
Right.
years later,
I-
which,
You know,
yeah.
I was just going to say, Exhibit A. What do you want? There, that tells you all you need to know. Now, has Wall Street and the City of London gotten rich over all this time? You bet they have. Look at the debt issuance. Who's the underwriters? City of London, Wall Street, Goldman Sachs. Look at the people that are the finance ministers, head of treasury, head of finance all over the world. They're all ex-Goldman guys, right?
Yeah.
This is a corrupt to the core system. And you've got Thomas Jefferson was screaming, "Whatever you do, don't let these guys take over." I mean, you've got through the years, and why? Because they were smart enough to know this is what's going to happen if you let them do this.
This is what goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is gold? Gold is the it's like kryptonite to Wall Street and City of London, because if you do not allow unfettered credit, well, that means you can't do a lot of the things that they do. And certainly, if you shut down, what about the primary bond desk of Goldman and J.P. Morgan et al. Right? Well, we're not going to have these big treasury auctions anymore. That's coming right out of their revenue and bottom line. Y'all don't need to be this big. So,
all right. So before I let you go, let's look into the future a little bit here. We just had an election. It got shooken up a little bit. And before you tell people where they can find you and get some more information on what you do, give me a little snippet. You're a finance guy. You're in that world. We're obviously getting a shakeup with the Trump election for his second term. You got guys like Elon and Vivek starting the Department of, what was it, Doge, or of government, all that
efficiency.
stuff. Efficiency. Thank you. You've got Trump hinting at, hey, I don't like the Federal Reserve chair, and the chair saying he can't fire me, and other people going, well, you're not even constitutional to begin with. And so there's a spotlight on stuff that, heck, Ron Paul was talking about in the early 2000s, and people thought he was a crazy kook when he came out with End the Fed. What do you see? What do you see? What does that mean for gold? What does that mean for Americans? Do you think there's going to be any serious spotlight shown on monetary policy from the Trump administration? It seems like he might be serious, and his guys might be. Like, what is your feeling being in that industry? I obviously can't predict the future, but what are you thinking when you're seeing all this stuff going on in the last few weeks?
Sure. I think that, first of all, the End the Fed stuff right this nanosecond is probably not a wise thing to do. And why am I saying that? Because if you look at what Jay Powell is actually doing, what he has been doing is counterintuitive to what one would expect a Fed chairman to do. Why has he been raising rates into a debt problem? Well, it may have a lot to do with sovereignty of the United States. And because, and this is, we can get way down this ladder, but there's something called euro dollars, and euro dollars were outside of the purview of federal Fed policy. So the Fed may wanted to, we've got to strengthen the dollar, we've got to get our house in order. Well, the euro dollars could go wild irrespective of what the Fed wanted to do. Okay. Now that's all. But if you've noticed, did you notice how LIBOR was shut down like about 2 or 3 months ago? LIBOR is no longer, London interbank offering rate is no longer a benchmark. It's been replaced with SOFR, securitized overnight funding rate.
Okay, what does that mean for people who aren't in the industry?
What it means is essentially the United States has taken back the pricing of the dollar. Okay, that's what it really means. That we are not what we want to have occur is not being suborned by City of London, Chinese, et cetera. They can't do it anymore offshore. It has to be done onshore because that's the SOFR rate. It keeps the dollars here, and it keeps the policy here. Now, there could be all kinds of ramifications to that, and it's not like I'm some sort of great Fed lover. I'm not, but I'm saying, given the size of the global system,
Mm-hmm.
and given, and you got to look at things like what Jamie Dimon, because nutshell, what's the Fed? The Fed is really it's really a cartel that works for the Wall Street banks. That's what it is. It's owned by, if you look at the ownership, who owns it. Jamie Dimon's one of the most, he's arguably one of the top 3 most powerful human beings in the world, because the Fed really answers to him and the guys that own the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
But Jamie Dimon has gone to to Washington and testified and said things like, I'm not doing green stuff, and I intend to continue to lend to the oil and gas industry. And I am a 3rd generation Greek immigrant, and my grandparents came here not to turn this thing into a commie nightmare. So there's certain, I'm not saying the Fed's a good idea. I think it's a terrible idea, but also for strategically, where are we? What are the realities, and what might get us there? Obviously, God's sovereign over all things that come to pass, including Jamie Dimon and the Fed.
Right.
But to the extent that you're getting sovereignty back to the United States, you're killing these demons like DEI and green, this, that. Those guys got to go. And right this minute, think Nebuchadnezzar. I want Dimon on my side. I want Jay Powell on my side, because God can use those guys to get rid of that garbage.
100%.
Once we get rid of that, and maybe Elon and Vivek get in there and pull a Twitter to X, where we're going to fire 85% of these guys, and oh my gosh, everything's way better now, right?
Yeah.
That could happen.
Yeah.
So I think that it's, if they're allowed, and what I mean by that is, this garbage where we're firing long-range missiles into Moscow, which is just asking for a nuclear response.
Yeah.
The Russians lost 30 million people between 1914 and 1945. And we think that they're like going to just cow down and do whatever we tell them to. We're out of our mind. That's not who they are. And so I just think that there are kill the Fed is in the future, and it's not something to forget about, but it's not right now.
Right.
Right now, these guys are, think Nebuchadnezzar doing God's work, even though they don't realize
they don't realize it. Amen. All right. So if someone's been listening and they go, I like Jim, I like what he's saying, I think I want to make the jump or leap, or I need some more information, where can they find you? Where can they reach out to you and your colleagues and have a chat with you?
Sure. It's very simple. My website is Alps PMG. So A as in Alpha, A as in Apple, L as in Larry, P as in Paul, S as in Sam, P as in Paul, M as in Mary, G as in George.com. The best way to get me is my phone number, 251-377-2197. But that's the best way to get in touch with us. And we kind of always on, because this is, I have conversations at night, early in the morning, all the time. But I truly, I tell my sons, one of them's 24, one of them's 21. Dad, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, well, remember, number one, the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. If you have any sort of calling to spread the gospel as a minister of the word, go do that. After that, try to figure out what is it that nobody has to ask you to do, and go do that. So that's what this is for me, both in terms of trying to restore what once was a powerful, beautiful expression of Christian faith and Presbyterian, Episcopalian worship, and this gold company. I never grow tired of what I do, because as opposed to when I was in Wall Street, not our hedge fund. I loved our hedge fund days because we knew that if we were right, we were really, really going to help people, which we did. I mean, we were like the only thing that was up for a lot of guys, and they had no liquidity, and they were down. You know, I'm down 20%, and they won't give me my money back. How?
Right.
You know, and so that. But other than that, you know, I'm a free market, a Christian, von Mises, Austrian economics guy, and I'm sitting around selling Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac debt. I mean, it just, you know,
Yep.
Okay, I got here, and I should have been smarter to not get here, but here I am. Well, doing what I do now is totally different. And let me say this too, for churches, if, to the extent there are high net worth guys out there, or corporations, small corporate Christian run businesses. What we've just done is especially for guys in Texas right now, if you took a core deposit, and I mean a core deposit, something that you're almost never touching, right? But you've got that, it could be material, especially for churches, sitting in banks, sitting in CDs. Some people will say, well, what about treasuries? That'll be all right. I'm like, no way. The government knows who owns them. They know the CUSIP numbers. They know exactly where they are. They can steal those from you too. But if you put your core capital out of dollars into gold in our vault in Shiner, we now have a relationship with 3 Texas banks and a too big to fail bank called Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. They're out of Canada, but they have Chicago and New York offices. If the Moore family did that, now you've got a core asset sitting in gold in Shiner. You can now turn around to the banks and do whatever you want in terms of their banking services. I need a line of credit. I want a construction loan. I want you fill in the blank. But what's the whole value add? They don't have your deposit. So if you get into 2008 2.0, they can't go, claw your deposit out of it. No, I'm sorry. The gold's here. And Texas Precious Metals ain't going to let them get anywhere near it, because all it is a collateralized line of credit. That's huge.
So smart.
Because mostly the banks they will not give you any services unless you keep the deposit with them. So that's a huge value add that we bring to the table as well.
Wow, that's great stuff. Well, Jim Hunter with Alps Precious Metal Group, thank you so much for spending time with us, explaining some of that stuff. Obviously, we'll link up below, guys. If you're listening or watching, just click on the link. You can get a hold of Jim with all the stuff that he threw out there. Jim, appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Greg, honored to be here. You're very kind to let us have some time, and happy to come on anytime that we can add some value.
Yeah, I might have to call you here, and I don't know, we'll chop it up about something else. Interesting guy, and you got a lot of information. I appreciate it. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. As always, you can find out more about us at dmwpodcast.com or all the socials at Dead Men Walking Podcast. We appreciate you telling a friend. We appreciate you sharing our episodes. It's the way we grow, bring glory to God. And we really like meeting you guys out on the road. And you can do that by supporting the show at dmwpodcast.com. We got some smart, snarky merch, so you can get one of these free mugs or one of these fun mugs here. Or we got the new shirt out, Job 13:5. How about you shut up and let that be your wisdom? Sometimes you just got to quote scripture to the pagans, even if they don't like it. All right, guys. As always, remember, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. God bless.
Be sure to check us out at dmwpodcast.com, where you can purchase the best and snarkiest merch on the internet, support the show, and leave us a review or message. Dead Men Walking can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Dead Men Walking Podcast, and on Twitter X at Real DMW Podcast. The Dead Men Walking Podcast is part of the Fight Laugh Feast Network. For exclusive show content, be sure to download the Pub TV app and become a member. If you're a business that needs to reach hundreds of thousands of potential customers in your demographic, podcast advertising might be for you. Send all inquiries to deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None your biscuits.